Hi guys, my last big book haul wasn't that long ago, but I got lucky again with used books, but also with a little free library. So 6 books in this batch I actually got for free, so here we go again. So I continue my Australian excursion and bought some more Australian books. They weren't actually all that far up on my priority list, but it is frustratingly difficult to get Australian books sometimes, at least the ones that aren't commercial fiction or hugely successful, so I had to buy what I could get. Carpentaria by Alexis Wright is the only book of this haul that I bought new because it seemed worth it. It is the story of, I think, a common Indigenous experience in Australia in a small town from the later decades of the 20th century onwards. It's the story of the Phantom family, who are the accidental leaders of the Pricklebush people who live on the fringes of the fictitious small town of Desperance on the Gulf of Carpentaria in northern Australia, northern Queensland. They are in permanent conflict with another clan on the other side of town and with the white people who run the town. I've already started this. I've read about 40 pages and it is quite hard work, but so worth it. I especially love the biting humor in it, and if nothing changes dramatically, I'm sure that after I've read this, I will want to read Alexis Wright's whole body of work. Extinctions by Josephine is about a retired engineering professor who is widowed and estranged from his children and gets a chance at overhauling his life and making it meaningful again, or even meaningful for the first time. Usually a description like that would send me running, but there are hints in the blurb that the book isn't just about the navel-gazing of rich people, and I think the title is in itself a hint, extinctions in the plural, so it's not just about the personal extinction of old age and then death, but also several other extinctions, like the extinction of species and of ways of living. So that sounds good, and it just was one of the few books of Australian general fiction, contemporary general fiction, that I was able to get at a reasonable price. Wimmera by Mark Brandi and The Broken Shore by Peter Temple are crime novels set in small towns, this one in rural Victoria and The Broken Shore in a coastal town also in Victoria. This one's a police procedural, but Wimmera is told from the perspective of a young man who looks back on the events of the summer in which he was 11 years old, and the events still affect the present in his personal life, but also in the town in general, because in the present a body is found and it's connected to the events of that summer. I've had a bit of bad luck with Australian crime novels if you've watched my recent wrap-up, but I'm determined to find the good ones that I'm sure are out there. Jasper Jones by Craig Silvey is a contemporary YA novel of the coming-of-age kind. It says on the cover that it is an Australian To Kill a Mockingbird, but I think that's simply because racism is a theme in this book. Jasper Jones is an Indigenous Australian boy. He is not the protagonist, though, so I guess the protagonist would be the scout character, but I think that's quite a stretch, and I guess To Kill a Mockingbird is mentioned simply because it is one of the few book titles that people are familiar with. And True History of the Kelly Gang by Peter Carey. This is about the famous outlaw Ned Kelly, who lived in the second half of the 19th century, so still in colonial times. He was the son of a deported Irish convict, and he joined the outlaw gangs in the bush to escape poverty and oppression. He was ultimately hanged at not yet 26 years of age for being a horse thief and a police murderer, but the result of his actions was that widespread corruption was uncovered in the colonial police force. So in time he became a national hero, or a white national hero, I should say. I only realized after I bought the book that it won the Booker Prize in 2001, so now I'm double curious. So that's it for the Australian books. Next I have A Summer in Skye by Alexander Smith. This is a travel memoir from the year 1864, and it is about the people and the way of life on the Isle of Skye based on the experiences of the author during the summer that he spent there. This seems to be a bit in the tradition of ethnography. Alexander Smith was Scottish, but he was from the lowlands, so the Isle of Skye would have been almost a different world to him, and especially to his audience in the 1860s. I've seen this book called A Prose Poem. I hope it's not too overwrought and cheesy and not too pretentious. But I love the idea of revisiting the Isle of Skye in a book like this. And then The Memory Game by the author duo Nicci French. This is a crime novel in the center of which is a middle-aged woman in whose garden is found the skeleton of a childhood friend who went missing and for now obvious reasons was never found. I think this is part detective story, part psychological thriller, because it is all about uncovering what happened all those years ago in the memory of the protagonist. And the last book that I bought is Yarrow by Charles de Lint. I've wanted to read de Lint for a while, but I never found a copy of one of his books at a reasonable price until now. Charles de Lint writes or wrote a fantasy that's set in our world, in Canada or in places modeled on Canadian towns and cities, and it's of the fae fantasy kind, so scenarios in which the veil between the worlds is thin and elements from the fae world enter into our world and vice versa. That's always a place of comfort for me in my reading. I just hope that Charles de Lint lives up to expectations. And now I have 6 books that I got from the Little Free Library, from 2 different Little Free Libraries, in fact. And I think that's the one thing that I'm most likely going to miss if and when I finally move away from this city, the selection in the Little Free Libraries. My first book is Notes from an Exhibition by Patrick Gale, the author of A Place Called Winter. This is about the family of an artist who has recently died, and now hitherto unknown or secret elements from her past in London posthumously enter her life overseas in Canada, and the family have to deal with that. This sounds a bit tired and tropey, but the art milieu has me intrigued. And The Snow Leopard by Peter Matthiessen. This is a classic of travel writing slash spiritualistic coming of age story. It's set in the Himalayas. There might be an awful lot of pop philosophy or even pop anthropology in it, and it might be totally overwrought and self-centered and very stupid white male blundering about in cliche Asia, kind of like. But if it is, I'd like at least to see it with my own eyes, because it's just such a famous classic. Aimée und Jaguar by Erika Fischer is the true story of these 2 women with these code names, Aimée and Jaguar, who met in the Berlin underground of 1943 and became lovers. One of them was Jewish and the other one was the wife of an army officer. And Andorra by Max Frisch is a play about the rise of fascism and mob mentality and the demonization of the other, using the example of anti-Semitism, which was the obvious thing to do for a writer of the post-war era. And Die neuen Leiden des jungen W, The New Sorrows of Young W by Ulrich Plenzdorf. This transposes Goethe's famous epistolary novel The Sorrows of Young Werther into 1970s German Democratic Republic and uses it to poke fun at and criticize the society there. And I also found a translation of the Quran, or an approximate translation, because the Quran cannot and must not be translated because the word itself is divine. So of course any translation would subtract from that divinity or destroy that divinity. But of course, a classic Arabic text is unreadable for most people in the world, including most Muslims. And most of them aren't content to just look at the words. So, of course, translations do exist, but they are always called approximate translations or some such. And I took this to have it for reference, but also because it's just such a beautifully made edition, isn't it? So these are all the books that I bought in June or got for free in June. Again, we have no ebooks because with my recent What's on my Kindle video, we are actually up to date in that department. I hope you found something of interest in this batch, and I'll see you again very soon with another video. Bye!